Lot. Um, so thanks for being here today. Let's go ahead and get started with introductions. I'm Dana Teray with the SCTCA, and I'll pass it off to my left.
Chris Barney, SCTCA.
Yeah, just till it goes green, they. Give it 1 second.
Nathan Schmidt, Smart.
Jared Hall, Petaluma Transit.
I'm Matthew Wilcox, Santa Rosa City Bus.
All right, and folks on Zoom, would you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
I am Steph Britt, Transportation Planner with SCTCA, passing it to Adam.
Adam Garcia, Data Analyst for Transportation and Climate at SCTCA. I'll pass it to Jacob.
Jacob Brown with Golden Gate.
All right, and Charles, would you like to introduce yourself?
Charles with Sonoma County Transit.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to public comments, not on the agenda. Is there anyone from the public on Zoom? Okay. All right, then we're on to approval of the meeting notes from June 11th.
Motion for approval.
We have a second.
Second.
All right, any opposed? All right, that passes, thank you. Moving on to item number 4, regional funding. We just have a update on the Measure M and Go Sonoma Citizens Advisory Committee's presentation schedule. That is in your agenda packet. This is really mostly to remind everyone of when their presentation times are scheduled. So for the bus operators, they are scheduled to present to the Citizens Advisory Committee on September 29th. And Smart should have a separate date, which I'm not seeing immediately. And maybe that hasn't been scheduled yet, but usually there is a separate date there. Please, if you have any conflicts with that, reach out as soon as possible. But I think that you all should have seen this earlier. Just wanted to make sure that it is here and you're reminded of it. Any questions on the Citizens Advisory presentation schedule? All right, great. Moving on to planning items, we have the vehicle miles traveled draft recommendations presentation from Chris.
Thanks, Dana. So I'll be providing an update on our VMT mitigation program recommendations. So we've been working on this for the past 1.5 years. Let me make sure I can share my screen here really quick. But we have a draft report out, which includes draft recommendations for the type of mitigation program we'd like to continue to study and work towards implementation. So I'll provide an update on what those recommendations are. And, you know, it's particularly relevant to transit since a lot of the VMT reduction measures could potentially include transit improvements and things like that. So, all right, let me try again, Ross. Looks like I'm good. All right. Cool. All right, there we go. So as I mentioned, we've been working on this, you know, over the last 10 years, VMT mitigation and VMT estimation. So a lot of this is in response to SB 743, which really changed the focus in CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, towards VMT as measuring transportation impacts away from level of service. So quite a big change in how project level impacts are measured here in California. So previously, the focus was on congestion, right? Like a new housing development or project would come in, create congestion impacts, and the response would be widening roadways or making signalization changes, things like that. And so SB 743 really shifted that away from localized congestion impacts to the more regional impacts of travel. And so the state convened a committee and, talked a lot about the way to measure those regional impacts and, decided vehicle miles traveled would be the best way to do that. So it's a requirement in CEQA now. So when a project is determined that it does need to analyze transportation impacts, VMT is the metric. So as I mentioned, it really changes where the impacts are determined to occur. So instead of right close to a project, it's a regional impact, looking at a county or a larger region. And then the implementation deadline for shifting to VMT measurement was in July 1st of 2020. So since then, any EIR that measures transportation impacts has been required to consider VMT. And our local jurisdictions are at different phases of implementing that policy. So some are further along than others. In some cases, it's more of an ad hoc analysis. Others have set policy in place. So most of this will be a review, but just a quick review of what VMT is it's really looking at vehicle travel across a system versus an individual point. It's a measure of total travel and looks at the big picture. So with congestion, you can throw out a counter at an intersection or roadway and get a really distinct measurement of what's going on at a local location. VMT is more dispersed, and so there are formulas, models, and tools that are used to estimate VMT. So it's more abstract measure. So as a project comes in and is proposed at a jurisdiction, there are a number of different steps that a lead agency, which in most cases will be a jurisdiction that's approving a project, will take to determine, what types of work is needed or will be required to analyze VMT. The first step is determining if VMT impacts need to be analyzed at all. So the state has identified a number of screening criteria that can be used to determine if a project is not really going to be having a VMT impact. And that includes project size. So smaller projects don't need to specifically be analyzed for VMT. Different project types can be screened out. Projects located near high quality transit stops. So here in Sonoma County, those are primarily smart station areas are screened out from VMT analysis. And local jurisdictions can identify screening criteria as well. So if a project is located in one of those areas or meets one of those criteria, it's done. They don't have to continue on in the process. The next step is if a project is determined, it will need to analyze for VMT. The lead agency or their consultants will calculate how much VMT the project's generating. So there'll be a number that's compared to thresholds. So I know Petaluma has set a pretty aggressive threshold. Other jurisdictions have set thresholds kind of in line with the state. So that VMT generation is compared to the threshold to determine if more work needs to be done and if impacts are being, if there are VMT impacts based on those thresholds, and if there are, mitigation needs to be identified. So in some cases that can actually be or occur at the local site. So different improvements or changes to the project can be implemented at the site to mitigate the VMT. But we've been hearing from our lead agencies over the last 4 or 5 years that a lot of times that's not possible. And there's a need to provide mitigation offsite for those projects. So that's where we're at right now, is trying to come up with a way of setting that up and providing some support for our local jurisdictions to do that. So we applied for a Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant to analyze, research, and develop recommendations for a VMT mitigation program for our county. So we've been working with our lead agencies and many of you on our technical advisory committee for that project to evaluate different ways of doing that. And so we've been working with a project TAC made up of reps or representatives from jurisdictions, many of you, and then state and regional agencies like MTC and Caltrans. So talking a little bit about the project goal is as I mentioned, there's a need to provide ways to mitigate VMT offsite. So that's the primary goal. So we've been digging into that and looking at what other jurisdictions are doing. Here's a look at the project scope and schedule. We're over towards the further right here. So, we've scoped out the project. We've evaluated what other jurisdictions are doing across the state. And I would say that no one's made a ton of progress in this area. So it's pretty new. There are a lot of concerns about litigation and legal risk as well. So a lot of the programs that are out there and that are being implemented have been challenged. So there's still a lot of work to be done to get these types of programs up and running. So we've talked to a lot of other agencies that have been doing this already, seeing what's worked and what hasn't worked, and have used that to help develop our own recommendations for Sonoma County. So right now we have our final report out. There's a link in the staff report if you'd like to take a look at that. But I'll walk through the initial process and recommendations that we're making in the report. We're looking at gathering feedback on that over the next few months. And then based on any feedback that we'll be gathering or receive, we'll be providing some final recommendations for our board by the end of the year. And then, getting their buy-off on continuing to develop the program. So again, VMT is basically in a really simple level. It's looking at how far cars are driving, right? So if a car, regardless of how many people are in the car, drives a mile, that's 1 VMT. If 4 cars with an undefined amount of people in the cars drive 10 miles, that's 40 VMT. So really simple calculation. We can reduce it at many different levels. So, site design and local improvements can be used to reduce VMT. Those can occur at a jurisdiction or a community level, but often when you're looking at in particular large VMT impacts, those need to be more regional type approaches. So we're looking at those mostly as part of our recommendations here. So there are 3 primary types of VMT mitigation programs that have been examined across the state. So those are VMT banks, exchanges, or VMT fees. So you may be familiar with these in other contexts, looking at endangered species or other mitigation type programs. So we work pretty closely with our TAC to look at the types of VMT mitigation approaches that we'd like to examine, including capital improvements, service improvements like transit headway improvements and different programs to see what our TAC was most interested in. And then we looked at, the flexibility of different strategies that could be included and how complex it would be to implement. This is showing kind of where those all fall. So impact fees are relatively easy to implement, but it's mostly focused on just capital improvements. So, it's prohibited to include services and service improvements in impact fee programs at this time. VMT exchanges are a little more flexible, but more complex to set up. And a VMT bank is the most complex, but has the most flexibility. So based on this, and in discussion with our TAC, we've kind of landed on starting with an exchange type program and potentially moving to a bank at some time in the future, because there is interest in providing VMT mitigation options that aren't just capital improvements, including service improvements and programs as well. So the main differences between a bank and an exchange is an exchange basically is kind of a matchmaking system between a lead agency or a person that needs the mitigation and an agency or organization that's providing the VMT mitigation project, right? So a housing developer may come in with a big housing development that has a VMT impact. The VMT exchange agent would basically, the developer would come to the agent and the VMT administration agent would line them up with maybe a transit provider that would provide service improvements to offset the VMT. So the main difference between that approach and a bank is with a bank, the developer would just pay into a fund that could be used to fund different types of improvements over time. But there are more administrative fees and things involved with setting that up. So in order to get something going sooner, we're looking at exchange first and potentially moving to a bank later on. So here's a look at the different steps of a VMT exchange. So we've identified 9 broad steps, which are shown on this chart, starting the program, going through all of these different steps. Everything on the left side of this chart are things that have to happen from the very beginning. On the right side, you can see different parts of the program that would occur over the course of the program, like identifying VMT impacts and reductions for certain projects, assigning actions to impacts, and then implementing those. So the blue line on the right kind of shows things that would be happening more frequently. The dark blue line is showing things that would happen at project initiation and setup. So kind of a dense graphic that our consultants came up with, but it's a way of kind of dividing the types of tasks that would happen at the beginning versus ones that would be ongoing over time. So, and this is all described in detail in the report, and I'll walk through each of the steps in the next few slides as well.
It's a really accessible part.
I know, I'll talk about that, and that's, I know. And a lot of this is really complicated, and it gets into really detailed and complicated legal issues that our legal counsels really honed in on, but that we've had to educate ourselves on a lot. So additionality is basically verifying that what you're using as mitigation wouldn't have been happening just anyway, right? So you have to verify that you're not just saying, oh, this was going to happen, we're going to take credit for it. But you have to, be able to demonstrate that, okay, this wouldn't have happened if we didn't have this VMT mitigation program in place. It's a true offset. We're just not taking credit for something that was going to happen anyway. So that's that whole thing. So there has to be a lot of monitoring and reporting and everything associated with it. And that's where a lot of the legal risk is associated. If you're not doing that, you're really wide open to getting challenged and your mitigation not counting. So yeah. So we're working very closely with our legal counsel on all of these issues, and to get something set up, there are a lot of legal agreements and issues that we need to be aware of and considering all the way through, in particular, because this is a really CEQA focused effort. So the first step is setting up a program, right? Initiating it. So it includes identifying who the agent would be, who that matchmaking, authority or group would be. And right now, we're recommending that SCTCA could potentially serve that role, identifying, people with VMT impacts, and then potential project implementers that would offset that VMT, so that matchmaker or middleman role. But there needs to be funding and approvals to set that up. So there would need to be some sort of process to offset the administrative costs of doing that. We need to develop governing documents. So how would this all work, right? Like, how would the VMT estimates be determined? How can we verify that? And then on the other side, how can we verify that the VMT offsets are actually happening? And those calculations are valid, and how can we monitor that all of the time? So we need to work with our legal counsel and potentially a TAC that we would set up over time to help develop those governing documents and guidelines. And then we'd need to set up legal agreements between participants, right? The lead agencies that would be seeking the VMT offsets and those that would be implementing the programs. So the next step is coming up with a list of projects or actions which would actually reduce VMT. So we've done a little bit of work evaluating some potential options there. But that would need to be really tightened up as part of project initiation. So those can be capital improvements, services and programs. We'd have a list that would be verified, and there's a process under SCTCA that needs to be followed to really verify that, including things like additionality and nexus and things like that. So then the VMT exchange agent would evaluate each action, determine how much it would cost, and then the VMT reduction potential. Then you would match these people that need or projects that need VMT offsets with those actions. So for example, there would be a development that would come in that would need an offset of 50 VMT, and these are just kind of rough numbers. So the VMT exchange agent would verify that they've done all the math correctly. So they'd come in and then identify an action to offset the VMT. The exchange agent would help line that up and verify that the amount of VMT reduction is valid. We'd confirm additionality and VMT reduction. So again, verifying that that action wasn't already going to be occurring and that it's all happening correctly under SCTCA. And then monitoring and reporting, right? Like, is the VMT reduction actually happening? So that's a key piece of SCTCA, and mitigation is making sure what you're saying is going to happen is actually happening. So that's part of that administrative cost, is doing that monitoring over time. And then as those VMT mitigation actions are implemented or consumed, you need to update the list from time to time, right? So if we have an initial list of perhaps a bus headway improvement, some TDM programs, bike share expansion, as those are implemented, they would kind of drop off the list. So we need to update and verify that list over time. So there are still things that can be used to offset the VMT. So that's the rough proposal for, how an exchange could work in Sonoma County. So our recommendation in the draft report, which is out right now, is to continue to study a VMT exchange for Sonoma County with SCTCA as that, exchange administrator. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So we'll have a final recommendations report come out this fall, and we'll be recommending that we set up a TAC to continue to work through some of those. One thing that we'll be doing later this summer, at the end of August or early September, is scheduling a workshop to look at how an example project would walk through those steps, right? So we'll be taking a couple of project examples, like a housing development project or a big commercial project, and walking through those 9 steps to show how it would actually work, right? Basically play that out. So we've identified a few starting things to study and start calculating out. So one includes headway improvements on some Sonoma County Transit and city bus routes. So we've done some initial calculations there of the VMT reduction potential on those, and so they'll be evaluated in this workshop. Also, Redwood Bike Share expansion, our Go Sonoma Commute Rewards program, and then free or discounted fares on transit. So those are all kind of on that test list that we'll be evaluating in that workshop. So, and I'll make sure all of you have an invitation in case you're interested, and we'll record that workshop as well. So that's a resource to take a look at. And then there's a lot of interest in looking at affordable housing development as a potential VMT reduction approach as well. But our legal counsel is really uneasy about that. There are a lot of questions about that right now. And the state's kind of taking that on. So as part of recent state legislation, they've proposed potential statewide TOD, affordable housing mitigation type program that developers could pay into for a statewide fund for affordable housing development. So based on that and all of our legal concerns, we'll still be watching affordable housing, but not proposing it as part of any local program for Sonoma County yet, unless nothing materializes at the state level. So then we'll continue to look at that. So as I mentioned, the final report will be out by the end of this year. And we have a lot to still do, like developing our governance structure and guidance document, setting up a TAC to help us do that and guide the program, figure out how to fund the administrative costs of the program, right? Like it's going to cost something to get things set up and do all those calculations and verifications and monitoring, right? So we need to figure that out. Need to work with our legal counsel on a lot of this stuff, like setting criteria for selecting what shows up on the list, right? Some jurisdictions have had an open application process where agencies can submit different types of projects that they think could be VMT reducing projects. And then whoever's administering the program could verify it, right? So we could do something like that. So we need an initial list of mitigation actions. So we've done some work on that, but more work needs to happen. There are a lot of legal agreements that need to be worked out, right? So we'll be working with our legal counsel on that. We need to figure out monitoring and reporting, right? How do we monitor VMT reduction? We can't really put a traffic counter out and do that. We can't hire an intern to count VMT at a project. So we need to figure out a way to do that. We'll probably need to do our own EIR on the program, depending on what the proposal is. And then we need to fund and set it up. So there's still a lot of work to be done. But we're making some decent progress on it. I think that's it for the presentation here. I think I have one more slide, but it's just kind of a wrap-up slide. But that's where we're at right now. We'll make sure that you all are aware of the date for that next workshop in case you're interested in participating to see how in practice it could play out. And if you're interested, I encourage you to take a look at the report as well. So it's pretty lengthy, but a lot of it is buried in appendices. So the meat of the actual reports, 70, 80 pages. So you probably just skip to the recommendations section or certain sections if you're interested as well. But, there's a lot of quantitative and calculation detail in the appendices if you want to dig into some of the initial calculations and everything there as well. But, I think that workshop will be a good way to kind of see how this could play out in practice. So we're working on those materials right now. But yeah, it seemed pretty simple going in, but there are a lot of complexities associated with mitigation, CEQA, and VMT. So a lot of moving parts and a lot of conversations with our lawyers about what we need to be careful of and before diving in. But yeah, happy to take any comments or questions, and feel free to reach out later if you come across anything in the report or have any thoughts or questions.
Why would you only look at offsite mitigation?
So the lead agencies are already doing the local on-site stuff. So as a project comes in, as part of the project approval process, they may be able to take care of that as part of the negotiations for that project approval. So
Could be if you have VMT above and beyond what, like
Yes.
parking reduction.
Exactly.
On-site bike parking and whatever else.
Yep.
EV charging or whatever would reduce.
Yeah. And one thing we've been pointing out to our local agencies as well is if they want to set up their own exchange or bank system for their own jurisdiction, they could use this type of framework as well. So it would be kind of a menu as a project comes in. Maybe you can do it using local mitigation. Maybe not, right? Like what's that remaining number? you could have some sort of ongoing negotiation with the developer on how to reduce the VMT, and that's what's been happening now. It's been an ad hoc type thing where they do some calculations that may be tight or less tight, right? On what they're gonna do to reduce VMT and work through it that way. But what we've been hearing with the development community is they want certainty, right? Like they want something that they can look at, they know what to expect when they're going through and developing something and not have to have a negotiation each time and not know how it's going to play out, right? So this would provide some certainty, some framework. Every project's being handled in a similar way, right? Versus having, you go in, you don't know what's going to happen each time. So from the development side, we've been hearing they want to see something like this as well. But
And who else created one? Like, does it have to be a county scale? Or could you?
we would love it if MTC did something, but
Yeah.
they're not.
Because they, all PMP sets have always seemed like a really big lift at the level at which it's happening.
Yeah.
More. But I know. Is Tam working on this as well?
They are, yeah. So they're working on a similar thing. VTA actually has recommendations out there. They're leaning towards an exchange type program as well. So they're moving towards implementation, but there's a lot that still needs to be figured out. The only program in the Bay Area that's currently up and running is one in San Mateo County. So they have an exchange that's being managed by San Mateo County. So Contra Costa has also looked into it. So they're kind of in a holding pattern as well. One of the most well-developed programs is down in Riverside County. So they have a lot of experience with natural resource mitigation programs. They've administered those for years, so they are able to kind of set up their VMT mitigation program using the expertise they already have in that area. So we've been able to borrow some of the ideas that they've been using, but most agencies are still trying to figure this out, and there's a lot of legal risk, and there's not a lot of case law out there yet. Things are being challenged all the time, so it's kind of a unknown as you go in setting something up. If you get challenged, what's going to happen, right? Not a lot has been challenged yet, so there's not anything to kind of lean back on as you go in. So that's a definite concern with our legal counsel, right? So being prepared as you go in case there are challenges and concerns. So, but yeah, it'd be great if there was a Bay Area regional program, but each of the counties is kind of looking at their own separate types of approaches right now. So.
Yeah, thanks for giving the overview. That was great. There's obviously a lot of nuance and complexity that goes into it. And it seems like you've covered all the bases. One of the challenges will be kind of describing it to the developers, to the employers. They want up to see all the behind the scenes about the sausage is made, but keeping it simplified, I think will be a challenge to explain it to them, I'm sure.
For sure, having a menu when you come in, right? Like, and I think the lead agencies will need, they can provide a lot of that orientation for the developers, right? Like saying, hey, we did some calculations, you still have these outstanding offsets. Here's an exchange. You could do these 3 things to offset your impacts, let them pay it, and you're done. Either the lead agency or the administrating agency would take care of the monitoring and everything like that. So that's the goal, at least.
A few questions for you.
Yeah.
So the VMT exchange agents, how many would there be? Where would they live? Is that a function that would be done by SCTCA, 1 or 2 people on the county level, or you think that would be folded into like the jurisdictions and part of the work they're already doing?
So our TAC recommendation right now is to have SCTCA do it.
Okay.
So, but as I mentioned before, there are other options, right? There could be a separate entity that could be set up to do that. Each jurisdiction could have their own type of exchange. And that may be a preferred way to go if you want to keep whatever's implemented within your jurisdiction, right? Like have a jurisdiction level program. Right now, what we're looking at for a countywide program, there could be a project in City of Sonoma that would offset their impacts in Runner Park or something like that, right? So there's that whole, geographic connection type issue that there's interest in kind of pairing that up to some extent, but if you're looking at a VMT at a regional scale, it may be more efficient to offset your VMT outside of your jurisdiction. So that's something we need to work through for sure still.
Yeah, and I see the benefits of that and having it within the individual jurisdictions, but especially as you get smaller, I'm sure it's going to be a big burden for them to take on potentially.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of administration, right? Especially on the monitoring side. So in this regional program, we're trying to look at different levels of projects that could be implemented too, and ones that could be scaled as well. So, a small project that comes in that just needs a little bit of mitigation could, pitch in and, maybe fund a Redwood bike share station or something like that, right? Or there could be a huge project with thousands of units that needs a lot of VMT. Maybe they could fund Sonoma County Transit headway improvements on a route for 10, 15, 20 years, right, to offset their VMT. So there's different levels of mitigations that will be needed, right? So
Yeah.
trying to think about that too. And on the service side, it doesn't help if you're funding something for a year, right? You need something for a set number of years. So the way Riverside County's doing that is, I think they're using 10 years. So if you're using a service, like a transit service improvement to offset your VMT, it has to be at least, I think they're using 8 or 10 years of secure funding, and they pay it up front. So that developer would pay, the cost of that 8-year service improvement to the transit agency. Here's the fee, and you guys would be in charge of making sure it's kind of parsed out over that time period. So yeah, that's kind of the approach that's being taken right now.
Let's see a couple other questions. When would the funding be available the soonest for projects? Would you foresee?
Oh man, probably not. End of next year earliest, probably. There's a lot that has to be worked through still.
Okay.
Yeah. Our legal counsel would probably want to push that further, but yeah. Right now we'll have those recommendations kind of wrapped up by the end of this year. It's dependent on our board wanting us to take this on too, right? For the draft recommendations, they were, supportive of us to keep examining it and keep looking at our initial proposal. So the initial, our recommendations to the board is going to be pretty similar in December, right? Let's keep studying this and work with the TAC to figure out how to implement it. So early next year, we'll set up that TAC. We'll start working on some of these things, like starting to work on a guidance document, right? Like how in practice would we do this? Coming up with a plan for covering those administrative costs, things like that. So there's still a lot of work that would need to happen for this to actually get set up. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And then kind of the last one I had. So there's kind of an ongoing program. You talked about kind of the oversight requirement and things like that.
Yeah.
Say if like an employer is providing bike share memberships or transit passes to their employees, what are your thoughts on the consequences and the sticks if they're not found to be doing what they're supposed to do that they kind of sign up for?
Yeah, that's a decision that needs to be made, right? Like who's on the hook for that? Is it the developer that paid for it? Was it the organization that said they would do something? Or is it that exchange agent, right? So, I think there are examples from other types of mitigation programs we could use to figure some of that out. So we'll work with our legal counsel on crafting those legal types of agreements that need to happen. And yeah, our legal counsel is definitely thinking about that because there are consequences if, as part of your monitoring, you're not doing what you said you were going to do. So yeah, definitely thinking really hard about that.
All right, thanks.
What are some of the strategies that they use to measure VMT?
A lot of it, right now, there are a few different ways of measuring VMT. We use travel models. That's one. So gathering current travel data like traffic counts, transit ridership, origin and destination counts, things like that, and calculating VMT that way. So that's one way of doing it. We're also using a lot of mobile source data like cell phone and navigation system data to get VMT counts as well. One kind of older method that's still pretty good and is used is doing travel diaries. And travel surveys. So actually interviewing people on what they're doing, right? Or having people fill out a diary for a week. What types of trips are you making? Where are you going? Things like that. So those are kind of the main methods that are being used. Yeah. So it'd probably be a combination of that for all three. Yeah.
Maybe you could sign up to put something more far,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
housing development, and just get everybody to sign up.
Yeah, there was a state effort 5 or 6 years ago where you could get an app. It was a state of California
Yeah.
thing where you could get the app and you basically had it track you for a week.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think a few of us in the office did it. I don't think I did, but there were a few that signed up. I think Suzanne, our executive director, our previous executive director did.
Yeah, I think I actually plugged something into my car.
Yeah, you plug
once.
something
There was
in,
like a,
A little
Yeah.
GPS
Yeah.
tracker thing.
I know everything.
Yeah, speed, braking.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Any more questions?
Yeah, please reach out if you have questions. It's complicated and we'll have more updates as we develop more. But right now there's that big report. It's probably not going to change a whole lot. We'll have kind of the results from that workshop added. And we have some legal analysis coming in from our legal counsel that'll show up in there as well. So.
Great, thank you. All right, so next up we have the Sonoma County Travel Model Forecast and CTP Performance Assessment presentation from Adam, who's joining us on Zoom.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Hopefully you can see my screen okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Okay, great. So today I'm going to be giving an overview of our work on the Sonoma County Travel Model Forecast update, as well as an evaluation of those different scenarios that we're evaluating, primarily from looking at 2023 and then the estimates for jobs and housing growth based off Plan Bay Area 2050. So we'll be going through just that quick update, the forecast update, and then digging into the performance measures, including system condition and safety, travel efficiency, transit use and active transportation, and then equity in the environment, and then we'll wrap up with just some next steps. Okay, so we're looking at 4 different scenarios here to try to understand, essentially, given the projected land use as well as our CTP project list, combining those to understand exactly how will that affect, VMT and other measures. So to start off, we've completed the 2023 existing conditions. So that updates our information on current land use, current bus network, and then any roadway changes that have been completed by 2023. The second scenario is an interesting one. It's based off some of the recent, over the past few years, I guess the stagnation of growth within Sonoma County and many other counties, the Bay Area and beyond, that's largely reflected in the California Department of Finance projections for 2050, which says we'll actually probably have a decline in population by 2050. They're actually projecting out using the past few years. So saying whatever's happened in the past few years will likely happen into the future. So just to test that assumption, we're putting together kind of a no growth scenario based off current 2023 land use, but then also including the CTP projects. The third scenario is the updated land use from Plan Bay Area 2050 with the CTP projects. And then the last one is the Plan Bay Area 2050 plus without any CTP projects. So kind of measuring what would be the impacts on our transportation system just by pure growth alone, without any of the transportation improvements that are being planned. So just to give you a little overview of Plan Bay Area's kind of should actually be household and job projections. My apologies. But in the chart, it's accurate, showing households. And this is actually most likely the occupied households at 189. That's 100,000. That's very similar to the census in terms of occupied households, and then showing a growth of about 25,000 new homes by 2050, and then looking down at projected jobs, about a 53,000 projection for job growth. So you can see a little bit of the share of that regional growth and how much percent growth is expected from Plan Bay Area. And to give you a little view of the different kind of current estimates as well as future projections, we've gathered just a few kind of bar charts here between population, housing, and jobs, trying to give kind of our best estimate in terms of where we're at in terms of those three different measures. The California Department of Finance here has noted that by 2050, they're showing a decline in population. But alternatively, Plan Bay Area has a more optimistic perspective that yes, growth will continue, jobs will continue into the future. So a few of the methods for assigning housing and jobs, we're essentially kind of looking at all the planned development projects that we're considering. Also just understanding what the 2040 projections were for anticipated development, and really focusing that development in priority development areas, as well as considering just zoning and undeveloped land. And then the last point that we kind of struggled with was just thinking about how our population and how schools are being impacted. As many folks know, there's been, declines kind of associated with somewhat with population declines as well, but declines in student population. And so there's also a similar assumption put into the analysis that kind of based off, again, California Department of Finance projections that there'll be a decline in those kind of high school age populations by 8% and college age by about 12%. And so just to kind of give a quick refresher, we'll be using some of these acronyms here to represent the land uses. So just to burn those into your mind, I think most of them are fairly intuitive. Strip commercial and shopping commercial, those might be a little bit different. Shopping commercial can also kind of be thought of more kind of general commercial as well. And so this is looking at trying to match that housing and jobs population growth within Plan Bay Area. So anticipating how much growth will take place based between 2023 and 2050. So a lot of numbers here. And I forgot to mention also that this slide obviously wasn't, or sorry, the slide deck obviously wasn't included in the in the staff report, but it will be made available after. So a lot of these charts will hopefully be more easy to dive into after. So the travel model summary findings, essentially, kind of as I mentioned, Plan Bay Area is showing kind of more optimistic housing and job growth. And essentially that as long as that kind of job growth matches that new housing construction, we should kind of try to maintain a somewhat healthy jobs housing balance within Sonoma County. But if that scenario, does fall through and population continues to remain stagnant, then that might actually lead to more of an imbalance of more jobs than housing in Sonoma County, which would lead to then increased travel from kind of workers coming in from outside Sonoma. And so this is just a breakdown of housing growth. You can see kind of what current is 2023 and then what the projected is, and to the right is that that percent difference. So that's about 25,000 new units added to Sonoma County there, kind of based off, primarily multifamily from what we're understanding related to kind of prior development areas, the efforts around transit-oriented communities, as well as just the prevalence of urban growth boundaries and more limited greenfield development. For projected office and commercial growth, looking at, decent growth in both office and then that strip commercial, but slightly less from the shopping general commercial. And also showing as well continued growth in the warehouse industries and particular light industrial growth as well. Quite a few projects that we're anticipating coming on board in the next, I guess, 25 years or so. So here's just a quick map. I don't want to bore you too much with these looking all across, but just kind of seeing where we're seeing some of the concentration of housing growth anticipated in parts of Petaluma, Rohnert Park, and Santa Rosa are anticipated to be kind of the highest growth areas. So jumping next to the comprehensive transportation plan update, this is kind of a little bit of a refresher for everyone, just to understand the CTP vision and goals, wanting to, connect people, improve safety, equity, and quality of life. I should say connecting people to the places we're trying to get to, not literally connecting people. But so for goal 1, being connected and reliable for those transportation options, having it safe and well maintained so everything's running smoothly. Being goal 3, having projects really based with the community identity and what they need. I think that's well represented in the current work right now from the community-based transportation plans. And then kind of getting to our new name change, Sonoma County Transportation and Climate Authorities, really trying to underscore that we want to have a zero emissions future as we move forward to the best of our ability, however we can make that possible. So there's several measures, performance measures, looking at these different kind of broad categories of system condition and safety, travel efficiency, transit use, and active transportation, and then equity and the environment. So we can kind of see how those fall into the different buckets that I just mentioned previously for the CTP. So we'll be going through all of these right now. So the pavement condition index really relies on kind of funding availability from the jurisdictions as well as state and federal government. So that's fairly hard to project just given the volatility of funding right now, but other ones such as transit connectivity, we've done some initial calculations, which may need some verification, but kind of a rough estimate is that given the CTP projects related to transit improvements, particularly on headways, trying to understand how many more hours will transit vehicles be operating given the kind of CTP project list. So about 200 hours I've measured so far. I'm going to be reviewing these numbers with Dana hopefully soon to verify and then potentially bring these back to the group. But this was just kind of our initial estimate based off those anticipated headway differences. Looking at collision rates, this is for collisions for all modes of travel. We're looking at kind of two different comparisons here. One is based solely off VMT. So the more amount people are driving, the more likelihood that there may be crashes on the road. So that's a direct correlation of to VMT based off collision rate. However, if we look at the TIMS data from UC Berkeley, which is the basis for our Vision Zero dashboard, we see somewhat of a different story. That kind of pre-pandemic, we were averaging around 6 collisions, at least reported collisions, that is, on a daily basis. And kind of moving into COVID, obviously there was less movement kind of in that 2020, 2021. But even with the return to work, we still see that there is a kind of a lower collision rate over the past few years. So some hopeful good news that we can, keep that rate continuing to decline. And now looking at hours of delay. So this is kind of total hours delay. It's not broken out. Actually, it is person hours of delay. So this shows obviously without any CTP projects and only new land use growth, there could be quite a significant increase in personal delay. But however, with the CTP projects, we note that there's, some moderate increase, but not quite as extensive, still kind of holding under that kind of 3 hours of delay. And that's a monthly, should mention that that's monthly person hours of delay. Still slight increase, but not as bad as it would be without any of the great projects in the CTP. And looking at average travel time, average trip length, you can see there's some differences, but essentially we don't get huge changes based off the different land use growths or the CTP projects. People are still going to be moving, similar distances, similar time lengths based off kind of all trips, or you can see work trips tend to be a little bit longer compared to kind of the average for all trips. So just interesting results there that didn't quite change as much as we were hoping to, potentially with more transit-oriented development. Maybe that might change, but again, we're kind of a large county. There's lots of things to do, lots of opportunities. So those values haven't changed significantly. Jumping over to transit use and active transportation, we can see here the based off the census, the means of transportation to work has declined for kind of non-automobile sources. The chart that's not here is kind of showing that increase in work from home tends to offset some of these losses in public transportation, bicycling, and kind of walking to work. And then for mode share, we're also not seeing a huge difference in kind of the mode share based off the travel model. But I think one of the important things, just kind of an aside to mention here, is that, you know, we're working with, you know, a somewhat antiquated 4-trip step model, travel model, that doesn't really do a great job of capturing kind of walking and biking, as well as what we're hoping to transition to in the next couple of years as an active, I'm sorry, as um, a travel model that kind of more takes advantage of individuals and how they kind of move around, joining trips and linking trips and being able to identify kind of bicycle facilities with more improvement. So we'll hopefully have more refined results once we transition to that activity-based model and away from our trip-based model, particularly for mode share. Let's see, I think for this one, whoopsie, might have forgotten to update this. Essentially what we're looking at is all the projects that have been, for all the bicycle lanes that have been updated from the, as part of the active transportation plan, and as well as the CTP, there's a significant increase in all types of bike lanes, kind of over almost 1,000 miles. Realize I forgot to add that legend, but this is in miles. And also the 2050 no project should actually be back down to kind of about 399 also. That's an error in that chart. So showing that kind of with the CTP projects, we should have that large increase in bicycle network connectivity. And let's see, in transit ridership, this shows a great boost with all of those transit improvements in the CTP, kind of jumping up from about 2.7% right now. But with a lot of that transit-oriented land use and the increased transit frequency, we can see that that percentage share of transit ridership jumps up to 4%, which of course we still always want higher, but is at least showing a nice increase there, kind of based off your CTP transit projects. And again, this is another one that doesn't change too much. This is kind of the average percentage of household income spent on transportation. We're anticipating that there may be some fees or other transportation costs that may increase in the future. There's talk of user-based pricing kind of at the state and regional level. Nothing that's specific to Sonoma County, within Sonoma County or stemming from Sonoma County, but there are kind of those larger conversations that might lead to some increase in the household income spent on transportation. And then when we're looking at greenhouse gas emissions, this is need to kind of emphasize these are transportation related greenhouse gas emissions, not just total. So kind of looking at our transportation sector, one of the major drivers that we're anticipating by 2050, given there are some current federal challenges to this ambition, but trying to improve the efficiency of our vehicles with lowering emissions through electrification and increased transit ridership. They were hoping to see a larger reduction in greenhouse gas emissions overall from 2023 to our 2050 CTP scenario. And let's see, next we've got our VMT plus VMT per capita, both included in here. So we can, I think there's some good news in terms of the line chart that's looking at the VMT per capita. So we can see that, you know, with population growth and all of housing and job growth, that we can actually still kind of maintain a relatively standard VMT per capita, which is, yeah, I think good news given kind of with all that additional growth anticipated, not necessarily increasing the the, the amount of driving that each individual would be required to do. And then kind of looking at a breakout a little bit from the travel model, we can see both kind of the top chart shows the sum of VMT per employee plus the sum of VMT per capita. So that gives us kind of our total per capita for that jurisdiction. So for instance, Cloverdale is at 15.4 for per capita, 9.4 for employee VMT, and that totals then 24.8 total at the top. These results also differ slightly somewhat for a few of the cities compared to our travel behavior study, which was really relying on cell phone data to track movement. There's some abnormalities where City of Sonoma seems higher than it should be by some accounts, and then Cloverdale seems a little bit lower on the other hand, given its kind of isolated nature and the need to travel more for additional resources outside of the city, that in the travel model, Cloverdale was noted to be quite a bit higher. And so again, it's kind of to that point that I'd mentioned earlier around our transition to the activity-based travel model, our hope is that we can dial in these numbers a little bit better. There might be some issues with kind of given Sonoma and Cloverdale are both kind of right on the edge of the county, that there might be some input or output abnormalities within our travel model. Petaluma, which is also kind of on the edge of the county, does show a little bit more accuracy towards having that higher VMT, just given more people kind of driving a little bit further to reach those destinations outside of Petaluma. Santa Rosa continues to be consistent as also with our our travel behavior study with showing low VMT given the kind of abundance of resources just immediately within Santa Rosa to get to your need a destination. You often don't need to travel as far compared to some of the other cities. And then just taking a look at kind of the other areas around the county, the rural areas, we can see a couple other differences. Obviously, kind of a lot of these rural areas, we would expect to have more driving. The coastal Gualala area, as well as rural Petaluma, kind of come out a little bit higher than the other areas. But yeah, are largely kind of consistent with our understanding that those rural areas will likely have higher VMT than more city-centered growth. So just to recap real quick and look at kind of some next steps, what we'll be doing with these 2050 results, we'll be meeting with jurisdictions over the next few months just to try to confirm our assumptions and our growth of the growth patterns based off the jurisdictions. Kind of along the same track, we'll be updating our next scenario, which is the general plan build-out scenario. So whereas the 2050 scenario is kind of more of a top-down, here's where growth will happen or we're anticipating to be happen from MTC, the general plan build-out scenario is more commonly used for a lot of the CEQA analysis that's based off what the cities and county and towns actually foresee for their built out development based off their general plan. So we'll be taking a look at kind of any cities that have had recent general plan updates. Everyone has had housing element updates, so we'll have to take that into account. And one of the things we're hoping to explore also in this time is figuring out a better way to coordinate and track plan development projects with each of the jurisdictions to make sure that we're not missing anything. So when those SQL analyses do come up, that we're, got the best and up-to-date information, and, no projects have slipped through the cracks. Looking into next year, once we have all this data compiled, we'll be working on the model validation. So that's kind of a third party consultant checking our results, making sure that our assumptions are accurate, our land use projections are kind of what seem reasonable. And then we'll also be looking into updating our travel behavior study update. We've got, yeah, some new data that we're toying around with that we can potentially do the travel behavior study in-house, but we'll have to explore the data a little bit more and work with the provider to be able to see what types of capacity that they have. One of the interesting aspects of that travel behavior study we're going to try to dial in a little bit more is just the impact of tourism on on our road and public transit networks. Just trying to kind of get a better sense of people coming from outside the county, or sometimes even within the county, and where those kind of high destination areas are, and looking for ways that we could potentially mitigate the impacts of the tourism industry, not to diminish it, but just to try to get people here, and then when they are here, kind of out of their cars and into kind of more healthy modes of transportation, both for the planet and for themselves. So that's looking into next year. And maybe I'll stop there and see if there are any questions, thoughts, and comments from TTAC.
Thanks for the great presentation. I had a question for you. It was actually on the bike side, the bike network slide that you have. That was great seeing the growth you project. Is that for certain classifications like 1 and 4? Is that like all classifications go into that chart?
Yep, that's 1 through 4. And again, just to say that there's an error on this no project that should be back down to kind of 399. That means, we haven't been investing in the bike lanes as maybe with funding limitations or something. But yeah, you are correct. That's all the classes.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, yeah, I'll as I mentioned, I think hopefully Dane and I will be able to chat next week about refining, making sure those increased transit hours are accurate and up to date, and we'll kind of bring those results back. I think those are kind of, most relevant, as well as the transit ridership, just kind of for for your purposes, to be able to project into the future. So. All right.
Thank you so much, Adam. And yes, we'll make some time later this week or early next week to do that. I just want to say it's actually pretty impressive to see the projected increase in transit ridership go up. It's like roughly over 25%, I believe, which is substantially more than with our last CTP, which was only about 0.3% increase. Sorry, from 0.3% increase to 1.1% increase, but that 1.1% would be would equal 25% increase. So that's great to see good transit projects in the CTP.
Absolutely.
It's like out 8,000 or so additional riders a day. So yeah, thank you for all those great transit projects in the CTP. So that is financially unconstrained. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get them funded in cycle 2, huh? Those goals.
If we can do everything, right? Do all the things.
Good job on dreaming big. All right, thanks, Adam.
All right, thank you all.
All right, moving on to item number 6 is transit integration updates on the local bus operator side. We are moving along with some additional updates to the regional website or regional landing page for transit. Working with the consultants on a schematic map where you could click on a route and that will take you to that transit operator's website. So once we have a good draft, I would love to share that with the regional transit operators and make sure everything looks good to you. Yeah, I'm excited to have this capability and have kind of a one place for folks to go. It'll be a fairly simple website with that schematic map and then links to the different transit operator websites and some kind of basic information. Yeah.
Does it include smart and mobile?
Yes. Yes. So we are having them add that in. They don't have it all added in yet. So once we have a draft of it, we'll be sharing that. We also want to include Mendocino Transit and the Amtrak Thruway bus line as well. Any other local transit integration updates folks want to share?
September is the regional, kind of blends the two, transit month. And we're talking about possibly doing a Sonoma County Transit Challenge. So possibly working on that and organizing it where people could ride all the Sonoma County transit systems in one day.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that is something we want to bring up on the transit marketing call tomorrow. And I know there was some discussion about doing that kind of through Marin and Sonoma counties. So we'll see if that can work. All right, let's move on to regional meeting report outs. Does anyone have any updates on regional meetings they would like to share with the group?
We can give an update on mascots. I think the biggest thing at the moment is mascots. We're very much in the outreach phase of that. We've already done a number of council, board, committee meetings and presentations. We still have a handful of those running through the end of this month. And of course, we've been doing a number of open house meetings. Petaluma's, for example, was on July 30th. And the attendance, from what I hear, has been good at the handful that have already occurred. I think about 50 people per open house. And there's one more in-person one next week in Santa Rosa on the 18th, and 2 more virtual ones for people to attend on the 20th. So still opportunity for people to attend those forums to provide their feedback. And then, of course, the survey is live and available on the Mascots Project website as well. What else am I forgetting?
I did just sort of in the regional meeting, but present at the RNM council. And there's going to be a presentation to the RNM committee. From what I understand, I'm still getting back up to speed on the 12th. That's the elected RNM body for subcommittee of MPC board. And I think it's September 12th. So it's going to be an overall transit coordination update. I think it's going to be Andy and myself. So I'm going to cover everything and I'm going to cover mascots, I think. So that's all right. Yeah.
Right.
And the website is mascotsplan.com or .org. Okay.
The official website is now up on MTC's side. It's much more comprehensive and nice than the one that David graciously got up on her website. But I don't think the redirect is working.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Unless
if you go
If I
to
clear
our
cache.
website, Marin Transit /mascot, and click on the website link, it goes to the right page.
Yeah.
The MTC link is very long. I don't think anyone's working on it. apparently it requires something. I don't really understand. why. So. But we've also gotten 400 or 500 responses to the survey.
Great.
Not very many in Spanish. So if there's anything you can do to push the survey in Spanish, that would be great. That is not uncommon. But I was surprised to hear we had 400 to 500 responses. It was a somewhat onerous survey to fill out, so.
It's great.
Either feel really happy or really angry.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Any other regional meeting report outs?
I can report on the mapping and wayfinding. It's kind of in a lull right now. Most of the meetings have been around design aspects, especially accessibility. So there's not really any new information on when the new pilots would kick off. Still relatively TBD. So that's currently where we are with those. And we had some growing pains with the service adjustment stuff getting out to the transit mall. I don't know if Smart had better luck. But it means,
Oh, we didn't change our schedule.
oh, you didn't change on that. Okay.
They did send out existing condition plans for Larkspur for the pilot sites. So they're moving forward on that. Did you attend that meeting on the QR codes?
Yes.
Yeah, any thoughts on that?
I don't know, it's hard. QR codes are. I feel like people ignore everything on our signs just as a whole and just call the number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't, if it's, I didn't want to say that in the meeting, be like, your word is pointless, basically. Because our writers don't care. And don't want to, learn to fish. So, I mean, when they work, it's great, but having them low, they're more likely to be faced. If they're on sign, they're too high, like no easy answer, unfortunately. So I just didn't want to like respond and give a non-answer and be like, I don't know. But that's really how I feel.
Yeah.
But also like, it's they need to make a choice at some point, and if we're gonna spend a bunch of money on something, is it even worth the effort? But it's interesting that you get that feedback from writers, like, I want a QR code, and then you find out that no one uses QR.
With Clipper, I think probably all saw that BART has been prioritized for, what do you call it, open fare payment systems. So that's great for them that they're getting that. And there was a marketing meeting this week, on producing promotional materials for that. So maybe we'll get that in the month May someday. That sounds like progress.
But they have stopped giving any date.
Somehow BART.
But on the other side.
BART got through got through the hurdle there, whatever. It's supposed to be. Weird.
I also think it means that the regional discount is accessible just to those people, right?
Probably. Yeah.
So there's a discount with the open fare payment? Okay.
I think accumulators or pay as you go
Uh-huh.
and that discount, I think, are valid through the open payment. Passes are not like that.
Yeah,
And discount, like you can't get a RTC card or
right.
from what I understand, but for just adult single ride, I'm pretty sure that discount and the accumulator feature applies.
Okay. Well, it was nice to see the draft regional transit map through the mapping and wayfinding that came out.
I thought it looked great at first glance, but could
Yeah.
still benefit from some changes. I think it was hard to identify the transit agencies of who you're riding when you're in each of the different parts of the region.
Right, yeah, it's
Kind of the goal.
right.
Yeah, oh,
okay,
yeah.
I
Like,
don't mean our goal there.
I mean, they had all the parks on there, great, the Golden Gate Bridge looked great, but you can't really tell what transit agency you're looking for.
yeah, which I could see would get complex quickly down at the city level. All right, any other regional meeting updates? Okay, let's move on to transit operator updates. Do you want to kick us off, Matt?
Sure, City Bus kind of had a service change on Sunday. We just got rid of one of our deviations on one of our routes. Other than that, everything's stayed about the same, but a lot of TFS issues, since we had new scheduling software.
Actually,
Yeah, it's
we got to.
partially user error, aka me. So it's not like all bad. It's just the, growing pains with change technology, stuff you didn't know about. So Google will show you that that trip still exists, but we have one of those warnings on there. Ridership's doing pretty well. Sure Rachel told you at one of the previous meetings, we did 1.5 million rides last year, so that's a big deal. I haven't dug into the numbers for July yet, so can give an update there, but from what the drivers indicate, that ridership's still pretty strong for us, so it's good news, and we'll see what happens when school ramps up, especially with the schools consolidating. So we're just kind of waiting for complaints about overcrowding. And then when Pioneer consolidates with Comstock, we really don't know what we'll do. Because we already have extra vehicles on that route for school, and then they're gonna throw middle school on the high school campus.
Arctic buses.
Huh?
Arctic buses.
Yeah.
Start charging them kids again. Your demand.
It's like a cover charge to get in the club, ride the bus. Only a Pioneer though, because it's exclusive. No issues there with equity.
Yeah, right. Did you have, I know you guys had a dip at the beginning of the year. Have you seen it recover?
Yeah, I did. I mean, it was hard to tell if that dip was just normal, like coming out of summer seasonal business. Because October ended up being our highest month, and then it went back down and it kind of went up. This June was higher than our June previous year, so that would indicate that we're still kind of growing. We're not seeing like the big jumps that we saw up year like 25 over 24. But it seems that people are still getting out there. We had a small dip with like when the immigration thing was more like first came out, and that bumped up again. So I don't know if people feel safe moving in the community. But it was very specific to the routes that have a higher Spanish demographic. And then we'll be hosting the mascots outreach on the 18th, as Jared alluded to, at the Central Library.
Thanks. All right, Jared.
All right, so for us, we received the last of our electric buses. We got 4 New Flyer electrics. And so we're finalizing the wrapping artwork now, and hopefully have those on the road around mid-September is kind of the estimate. So we're excited about that. Our facility electrification was awarded by council last week. So starting that October 1st, hoping to be done by the end of the calendar year in an ideal world and have our yard be back to normal. Working as were the other agencies on the. Yeah, we already have the switch gear on hand, the chargers on hand. Now we just need literally the construction to install them all. So. Working on SCTCA Cycle 2 projects, as everyone got those all in last week. We submitted 4 of them. Mentioned mascots. Our schedule changes also took place over the weekend. Most of the schools in Petaluma go back to school today. So today is kind of a busy day for everyone. I'm sure some of the folks here experiencing that. We're close to procuring 5 cutaway buses. They'll be our first electric ones. And so that's interesting, but it's a more limited market out there, as I'm sure people have seen. It's not like on fixed route where you can get buses with fewer kind of constraints. On the paratransit cutaway side, you're much more constrained with the vehicles available to you. So we're likely going to go with the Ford E-Transit Game Changer by Forest River.
Big game.
It is a game. It will be a game changer for sure. Not to over exaggerate.
What's the range?
About 120 miles we anticipate, so I got the sheet if you guys want to take a look later on. And then our transit specialist position has been vacant for a couple months, hopefully filling that, maybe having that person on board in 3-4 weeks. So look forward to introduce everyone there. And then our Van Hool buses are also on the road too, the ones we got donated from AC Transit. So you'll see those running in Petaluma.
Well, this is Nathan. He's our new planning intern. He just started.
Awesome.
Last week.
Me too.
Maybe.
So he's learning everything all at once. He'll be with us for a year.
Wow.
Yeah, he's an SSU graduate in planning. And we're very happy to have him. He's mostly going to focus on the shuttle
Cool.
program, but other things too.
You the last graduate from that program?
Thank you.
The last graduate.
Doesn't exist anymore.
No, the planning's
It
program
is?
still around.
Okay, I thought they got dismantled and all like.
They're consolidating another program into the planning, but the planning's still around.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I was telling people, I was like, I graduated and doesn't exist anymore. That's good news.
We got several staff from that program. I hope it continues.
Yeah. it's like half the people in planning in this county come from it.
Yeah. Well, it's so nice to have people who study local projects, right? And are invested locally. So, yeah, we really prioritize that. Art, see. We had 132,000 people in July. For smart, I mean, Windsor is really boosting up. So, that's really great to see. We had hoped that it would bring in, so I think we're seeing around 300 to 400 boardings a day at Windsor, so that's an additional 800 total points for a round trip. It's a lot. Also, what we're seeing is that Santa Rosa downtown is now the busiest station. It's past Petaluma. Sorry, Jim. That's because of Windsor opening. It is exactly like what the original smart EIR predicted. And Santa Rosa had always fallen short, but it's because we didn't have those stations open. So in theory, as we continue to build to the north, Santa Rosa will be even more of that central hub. We closed out the year at about almost 1.2 million. Not as much Santa Rosa City.
Sounds like you'll eclipse us. We'll have to expand our service area.
See anything else? You might have seen in the newspaper, it got a strange amount of coverage that Windsor, we had to stop running early service due to the delay on their quiet zone approval. Their quiet zone was approved a couple weeks ago, so we're now running full schedule again. And how many big news?
Let's see, we launched our mobility wallet for our Marin Access program, and it's doing very popular. Doing a lot of work out on the back end, but in general, it's working. And it's popular with riders. There's definitely been a lot of customer service calls, just getting people up to speed on how to use it and how to check their balance and all of those things. We are continuing to work on our facility. We're about to release our CEQA document, probably in the next week for that. So we're excited to get that out on the street and sort of continuing to check through milestones on our facility development. Ridership continues to be strong, and we did for mascots related, we did move our public hearings to October. Just to give ourselves a little more coordination time. If Golden Gate ends up making any tweaks to their proposal, we can coordinate because our services are so intertwined in Southern Marin. So we're just giving ourselves a little bit more breathing room between the end of this official mascots outreach process and then the outreach we will do for our service changes for the response. So yeah, I think those are the big things.
Thanks.
The most exciting things at Sonoma County Transit, let's see. We did do the schedule change August 10th, like everyone else, a couple of GTFS hiccups as well, so that kind of just always happens. But we did get the used new flyers in service the same day, so no issues so far. It's pretty exciting to get those on the road, especially because of their cost. So the longer they run, it's kind of like out playing with house money, you know? And we also got the 2 new cutaways on the road, so they replace old cutaways that we used out in the river area and for Sonoma lunch relief. So they've got fresh new vehicles and pretty excited about that. That's about it though.
Right. Thank you. And Jacob, did you want to give an update on Golden Gate Transit?
Yeah, I get, and David usually leaves me with some planning updates. He did not do that. I'm embarrassingly naive about the planning side of the house, but I can tell you that we did have an kind of unexpected ridership boost in July. Bus was up 8% over July of last year. Ferry up 2.5%. So yeah, some good numbers there. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think that takes us to the end of our agenda. Any other business comments or announcements?
I have a couple announcements I can make.
Okay.
So we have 2 transportation resource fairs associated with our community-based transportation plans in Central Roanoke Park and South Santa Rosa Avenue. So I know City Bus and Sonoma County Transit are participating in at least one or both of them.
Yuri will be there.
Yuri will be there, yeah. So the first one's happening this Saturday down in Roanoke Park at John Reed Elementary School. So yeah, it's a great opportunity to provide feedback on the projects that have been identified by the community. So we have a list of different improvements available for the community to provide feedback on at both of those. So that one in Roanoke Park is happening this Saturday, and then the following Saturday, August 23rd, the Santa Rosa Fair will be happening at Taylor Mountain Elementary School. So yeah, should be fun events and food on hand and activities for kids and yeah.
Yeah, and we will be, we'll have some mascots survey there as well, and yeah, reached out about other materials, so we'll be pulling that together as well. All right.
Dana, I had one other thing to bring up, and I don't know if this is the right venue or not, but with regard to mascots, fund transfer, the Golden Gate is receiving funding for SMART, RM3 funding, to support the mascots implementation for SMART, and we need to arrange some kind of mechanism for transferring that.
Yes, so we yeah, right, yeah, we can get back to you on that. We're just waiting on like one more piece of input on the process, and I will be getting in touch with you as well as Luis at MTC about it. So yes, coming shortly.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, just let me know. We can work out whatever we need to do on our end. So thank you.
Thanks. All right, thanks everyone.